Thank you. Thank you. So, good afternoon, friends. It's my pleasure and privilege to welcome you for the last master speaker session, the session with Mr. Padmanabhan, whom we all know as Padu. Padu is a very popular person in the energy sector. Was the writer of the book, The First Fuel: India's Energy Efficiency Journey and a Radical Vision for Sustainability. Was formerly the energy advisor and energy specialist, energy advisor for the USAID and energy specialist for the World Bank. Muthu has played a very key role in accelerating energy efficiency movement in India through his various services and his expertise. Has conceptualized several national and regional energy efficiency programs, contributed to significantly to the power sector reforms and regional energy integration during his time at SARI. Contributed to energy water nexus, clean energy and energy access programs, several activities, including establishment of several centers of excellence. We personally, Paddu, thank you for your personal contribution to the establishment of the GBC and your time during the formation of the Indian Green Building Council. Thank you for all your support, wisdom, and guidance, and we continue to gain from interaction with you. Paddu has also been a winner of several awards, including the Hall of Fame Award of the IGBC, which IGBC gave to him for his contribution to the Indian Green Building Movement. Today, Paddu is here to speak about his book, the First Fuel, which is a book on India's energy efficiency journey in the last 40 to 50 years. Having read the book, I must say it's an extraordinary book covering India's energy efficiency journey for the last 50 years, very beautifully with a blueprint for the future. Paddu says it's an informally told story of India's energy journey, but I must assure you that it has all the elements of a detailed research report on the history of energy efficiency of the entire country. The book has got a catchy title and several catchy subtitles, and each of these subtitles and titles do justice to the material what is inside and presented in the book. BBC's vision in 1922 was to inform, educate, and entertain. I must say this book of Paddu goes much beyond all this. It, of course, informs, educates, and entertains us on India's journey for the last 50 years, but also inspires all the readers to take up steps beyond and take up steps for further improvement of energy efficiency, and also gives a blueprint and direction for the readers. I think this is about the book, an extraordinary book, I must say, and the book is available in Amazon and all of the major bookshops of the country. Thank you, Paddu. Thank you. We are privileged to have you be present here and speak about this book, and of course, your involvement in the energy efficiency movement of the country. First of all, Paddu, what is it that you've been a collaborator, an implementer, a developer of several programs, as well as a thought leader? What was your motivation of writing this book? Also, share with us what does the book contain, some salient aspects of the book. Over to you, Paddu.
Thank you, Giri. Thank you very much. Thank you for your warm words of introduction. I'm honored and privileged to be participating in this Energy Efficiency Summit. You've made a reference to my latest book, so let me begin with that. First Fuel, India's Energy Efficiency Journey. I've often been asked why the term First Fuel. The world over, and it's no different in India, more energy is saved from energy efficiency than is being generated through fossil fuels. Cumulatively speaking, we have saved more energy over the years than we have received in terms of sources of energy supply. In the past, energy efficiency was considered to be the sixth fuel after coal and oil and gas and nuclear and renewables. But now it's clear in the wake of decarbonization efforts, in the wake of the red code of the IPCC, that energy efficiency is center stage and is indeed the first fuel. You also asked me this question, what was the motivation in writing this book? See, when you enter the bookshop, any bookshop, you'll find there are endless rows of energy, endless rows of books on energy. And most of them are on the supply side of energy equation. There are books on coal and the history of the coal industry, the books on oil and international oil scenario. There are books on the power sector, the sector reforms, and lately there are a whole lot of books on renewable energy. There are very books on the demand side of the energy equation. And here too, the books are largely technical treatises on boilers, on furnaces. There are books on energy audit manuals, and there are case studies, a number of case studies. And you all in CI, GBC have generated a whole number of case studies in the context of the award program, for instance. But these largely focus on goals, rarely on the process. One needed to articulate the process, the evolution of energy efficiency in the Indian context, and the role of bygone institutions, unsung heroes in conceiving, planning, and delivering this energy resource in the first few. And to do this in the form of stories that is relatively jargon-free for the common man. Did you know, for instance, the earliest beginnings of energy efficiency in the country was in the mid-60s, far before the oil crisis. And it was accidental, purely accidental. As the story goes, at that time, industry, which was the largest consumer of energy, because we rarely consume much energy in the agricultural sector, there was no service sector to speak of, and the building sector was in its infancy. So it was industry. The industry in Mumbai had to switch over coal because coal was difficult to procure for Bengal, Bihar. It was coming across the western Ghats and had to go over the hill ranges, and hence the availability of coal was poor. Coal also required a lot of space and so on. And it was, by a strange coincidence, two refineries in Mumbai had excess of fuel oil, which is heavy bottoms, and they wanted to market it. And what better than to market it to industry? But an Indian industry in the mid 60s did not know how to use oil. There's very little oil being used in industry. So they needed some. And the Planning Commission of India at that time requested the National Institute of Efficient Service of the UK to come in and help. And NIFIS of UK came by and they coordinated their work with the National Petroleum Council of India, offered a fuel efficiency service. So what started as an energy substitution or a fuel substitution strategy ended up as a fuel efficiency strategy, which came to, because in 1973, when the oil price hike took place, about a few years later, at that time, the NPC had a core group of fuel efficiency specialists who could then work with the government of India and with Indian industry and so on, and help in the efficient use of fuel oil. And that led to the establishment of the Petroleum Conservation Research Association and so on. So it is this process of institution building, which was paramount to our energy efficiency successes of those days, that this book refers to, but it does it in the context of stories. And let me end with one small snippet here. In today's metered digital economy, it is hard to conceive this. The earliest tools for determining how efficient a boiler is or a furnace is was based on two objects, or probably three. One is a handkerchief, a second is a mirror, and a third is a ORSAT apparatus or a gas analyzer. My boss at that time in the early 70s, and probably the person who laid the foundation for fuel efficiency and energy efficiency in India, the late P.R. Srinivasan, who was director of the National Productivity Council. He, with a handkerchief, used to go around boilers, and based on where there is a negative draft and where the handkerchief gets sucked in, he realized there was excess air entering, and he used to plug those holes. The mirror was used for the firemen to look at the mirror so that they can see whether there is, and the mirror is kept outside the boiler room so that they can see whether the base of the chimney, whether the smoke is black or whether it's entirely white or whether it is haze brown, which is what it should be for good combustion. So, and the offset apparatus was to find out what is the excess air in the flue gases. So with these three instruments, we were able to save 20 to 30% fuel in, let's say, a shell tube boiler, such as a Lancashire boiler or a Cochrane boiler. Now that is hard to conceive of, but it was all based on the power of observation and experimentation. So there are several anecdotes of this kind which readers would like to read about as they try to understand the journey of energy efficiency. The journey which took us from fuel efficiency of the 60s and early 70s to energy conservation to energy efficiency and now to energy productivity. So these transitions are covered in its form of a story. Over to you.
Thank you, Padhu. Thank you. The handkerchief, mirror, and offset apparatus makes very interesting reading. I think you have several interesting anecdotes in the book, where I am particularly amused by one of the anecdotes where you mentioned you presented about putting up an economizer in one of the textile units for a boiler with about 25% saving, and the owner of the factory saying that he will put 4 economizers so that he can save 100% of the fuel of the boiler. But Padhu, I think we have come a long way in terms of energy efficiency. Today, Padhu, we have about 150 companies who are present here who will be receiving the energy efficiency awards later in the evening. Many of them are done exceedingly well. Some of them are world class in terms of their energy efficiency performance. And of course, you said mentioned about energy conservation, then energy efficiency. Then what next, Padhu? We would like to listen to you from your point of view on where should the Indian industry look forward to?
That's a very good question. Where do we go from here? You're absolutely right. Indian industry has done well as far as energy efficiency is concerned. Much of the short-term measures have been implemented. And now where do we go from here? I would like to frame the question a little differently. How do we reimagine energy efficiency in the context of Indian industry? And I think we can do it by asking 2 questions, or rather moving from one question to another. Thus far, we have asked this question, how is energy used in an industry? And the answer is pretty straightforward. You do an energy audit, you identify the energy conservation measures, you implement the ones that make the most sense in terms of return on investment, end of story. And this has been repeated time and time and time again in the Indian industry as well as in other sectors too. How is energy used? Now you need to ask the question, what is the energy used for? The moment you ask the question, what is energy used for, then you look at the value that energy brings to that particular industry. At a macroeconomic level, it is the value, that is the GNP contributed by the use of energy. At the industry level, it could be the revenues generated by the company. And clearly, one can move to value-added products, which manufactured and which could give a better return to the industry for the same level of energy used. Let me give you an example. Do we have to move and manufacture this mild steel, or should we go all the way and manufacture precision tools? That gets you a better value in the market. Do we manufacture newsprint and paper, which are of standard paper, or do we manufacture specialized paper? Do we manufacture specialized cement, or do we manufacture pozzolana cement? No, it's not that we are not doing all of this. We're doing a lot of this. To a large extent, value addition has been taking place. But if we have a structured strategy for Indian industry to look at value addition as defined by the term energy productivity, in other words, we move from energy efficiency to energy productivity, I think it's time that Indian industry rose to that challenge. To my mind, energy productivity would bring about not simply energy savings, but also will bring about all the attributes that efficiency has, all the core benefits of energy. There are tremendous core benefits that energy efficiency brings to the table, and Indian industry needs to work towards getting those core benefits across. I have a chapter in my book called Reimagining Energy Efficiency, energy productivity storyline. And I've described what I'm saying in great details, both at the macroeconomic level as well as at the unit level. I've talked about some of the research that I was privileged enough to be involved in at CAPSAC, that's the King Abdullah Petroleum Research Institute in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia a few years ago. And based on that research, we made an analysis of how India energy productivity compares with the rest of the world, and how it compares with China and how it compares with the West and so on. And that particular chapter, I would request corporate India to, look at that essentially. And if I have to say it in one sentence, it helps corporate India to move energy efficiency from the boiler room to the boardroom. That's the challenge. How do you get energy efficiency, which was until very recently a boiler room subject? All the stuff on fuel efficiency and energy efficiency at the shop floors, all boiler room subject. How do you move it to the boardroom? And energy productivity.
Thank you, Baddu. Thank you, Baddu. From energy efficiency to energy productivity, moving things from the boiler room to boardroom. Thank you. Baddu, you are also one of the persons, as I said earlier, involved very closely with the Green Business Center, and several of your support to the formation of the GBC and the Indian Green Building Council have been significant. And of course, we had the first building coming up in India in 2003, 2004. And since then, the green building movement have grown significantly. We have large number of IGBC members, including the chairman V. Suresh, participating and listening to you. We have nearly about 7.8 billion square feet of green building coming up all over the country. How do you feel about the growth of green buildings in India and about IGBC? And what is your further advice and guidance to IGBC as we go beyond?
Thank you, Giri. And I kind of suspected you'll ask me this question because CI Green Business Center was involved front and center with the green building movement. Now, there is again a chapter on this, and it takes a pride of place in much of the work that I have been involved in and much of the work that we have all been involved in. The green building movement. India is number 2 in the world, as you rightly said. We are around 7.8 billion square feet. And we are moving fast towards 10 billion square feet. And thanks to the role played by so very eminent stalwarts who have contributed to this. What the book essentially covers is how did the green building movement start? When did it start? And there are anecdotes around that particular issue. It's important, I think, is that we have to admit that we entered into the green building movement in the early 2000s without much of an understanding of what green building is. In fact, as a matter of fact, the accent at that time was to set up a green business center in Hyderabad. But the decision was taken quickly, and I thought it was a very right decision, that the Green Business Center must be housed in a green building. And it was audacious on our part at that time to even state that the first green building would be a platinum awarded building. So we set up a goal, a very high goal, thanks to the leadership of Mr. Jamshid Godrej and to the leadership of CII, Raghupati and others, that we went forward with this audacious goal. In retrospect, I think that was a great thing that we did, because that got us to work on a mission mode. And the first green building was, as you very well know, and you have your offices in that building, was in June or July of 2004, and inaugurated by the President Abdul Kalam. But along with that came the understanding that what it takes to rate buildings, what it takes to develop green buildings. And the IGBC was established, and the IGBC is now got a very enviable record. Now, you asked me this way, and this story is known to the IGBC people, not known to the rest of the world. That India, with 20,000 square feet in 2003, is now number 2 in the world with almost 7.5 or 7.8 billion square feet, and fast moving towards 10 billion square feet. And there are so many energy lead assessors and so on and so forth. And the green building movement has taken on so very many forms. And I think you and your colleagues are better placed to describe what the green building movement is today. But what I've tried to describe in the book is the compulsions and the people and the anecdotes that into making the green building movement happen. A peek behind the curtain, so to speak, so that one will understand the role of stalwarts like Prem Jain, of stalwarts like B. Suresh, stalwarts like Parshuraman, and the support of the US Green Building Council, the role played by Cat Williams, who was the one who came to India at my invitation in 2000, and was very skeptical whether India is the right geography to nurse and grow a green building movement initially. But the response that she saw from Indian architects, and there were very many of them, Karan Grover is certainly well known as the first architect, Indian architect who designed the green building in Hyderabad, and others, very many others, actually responded to the call. And it was all done under the leadership of Jamshid Godrej. I was with USAID at that time, and we were privileged to foster the partnership between the Indian green building movement and the US green building movement, which was actually at that time also growing. It is not as though the US had all the answers, but they did have a process, and we learned from that process, and we built on the process, we improved upon the process, and today you can see the story, you can see the results of all of it. Where does the green building movement move from now? Well, the sky is the limit. I don't think I have the time enough to get into all of that, but I am very sure that Mr. Suresh and his team have got very good ideas as to where to take the green building movement to the next level altogether. The next level altogether would be intimately tied to net zero kind of approach. And I guess that's what something the green building movement is looking at.
Thank you, Padu. What you say is absolutely right. The IGBC is moving towards the net zero green building movement in the entire country. The other area, Padu, where you have been very closely involved has been the power sector. You have contributed extensively to the capacity building of the power generation units in the country, particularly by the state sector, and your involvement in terms of fostering cogeneration, the sugar plants, and then capacity building of the distribution officials of various state government utilities have been significant. The drum program is one of its kind, perhaps in the entire country. Now that there is a great push towards renewable energy, Padu, What are your thoughts on how the power sector should go ahead in the near future and in the future towards net zero?
Well, Giri, the power sector has again place in the book. It's covered under 3 chapters, so it has quite a lot of bandwidth in the book. One is, as you rightly said, on cogeneration, and that's something that I'm personally very excited over, because as a thermodynamist, we know that heat, you need to convert heat into power, and you'll do that and it's basically limited by the Carnot efficiency. But a cogeneration system, you can have simultaneous heat and power at higher conversion efficiency. This was known to us very early by the thermodynamist Mr. P.R. Srinivasan. He often mentioned that. So cogeneration was a very logical thing to attempt way back in the 80s, but at that time, very few industries were cogenerating, if at all, and the only one which were doing was the sugar industry, and sugar industry was using integrated technology. By the 90s, it was very clear that cogeneration can play the same role as what it played in the US, where cogenerated power was available to the utilities to purchase, and we had no examples of outside the fence cogeneration. It was all within the fence cogeneration. And to cut a long story short, a project development team was mobilized. I happened to lead the team way back in 1993, and that team had members from Hawaii, sugar industry, partnered with Indian industry, partnered with Indian manufacturers, and did a project development effort which led to the first cogenerated plant in India in sugar industry, which sold power to the grid based on power purchase agreements, based on banking and wheeling arrangements. And that replicated itself right across that state, in neighboring states, and then to North India. And today we have about 10,000 megawatts of cogenerated sugar power. So that's one kind of an example. And there's a chapter on cogeneration which says sugar cogeneration, the deep south shows the way. There's another aspect on the power sector, and this was power, pelf, and pandemonium. This describes the power sector's foray into private power and the Enron saga. We didn't play a direct role in it, but we were observers and we were able to see what was unfolding. The third chapter, as you rightly said, is last mile distribution. That was what the drum project was all about. And it describes how the drum project was conceived. Today, drum is well known in the utility sector as an experiment that worked, an experiment that took energy efficiency in the power sector to logical conclusion in 2 or 3 pilot areas where loss reduction was dramatic, T&D loss reduction was dramatic. The close down of transformer, the shutdown of transformer was reduced dramatically, and more importantly, the quality, reliability, supply of power was met international standards. How was that done is also described in that book. Close to all of this, very close to all of this, and I'd like to end with this statement, was a statement made by one of the doyens of the Indian power sector, Mr. T.L. Shankar, who is no more, who was actually the chairman of the Andhra Pradesh State Electricity Board, and then later he was member of the Government of India committees, the first member of the Field Policy Committee of the mid-60s, so on and so forth. A very, very articulate gentleman in the power sector. And he made a comment to me once, and this was in 1996. I was a bank at that time. He said, the fate of the Indian power sector lies in how they manage use. And that area of research which took me at least about 10 years, partly when I was at the World Bank and later at USAID, and looking at the water energy nexus in agriculture. And that resulted in some very interesting studies, and some of these studies do not end up with anything on the ground, but our understanding kept improving, and we were all, in a sense, frustrated that we didn't have a demonstration project that demonstrated efficient use of energy and water in a particular farm. Until I think it was in 2005 or 6, when in collaboration with the Bangalore Electric Supply Company, Westcom, a state-of-art project was implemented in Dodabalapur near Bangalore, which actually looked at water and energy conservation under a business arrangement of these service companies investing and farmers participating and the utility paying through this process. So it was this network of farmer communities through NGOs, manufacturers of pump sets and so on, and the utility coming together and implementing a project. So I have an entire chapter on this water energy nexus. So again, just to summarize, because it's difficult to get into every nook and cranny of the power sector because the power sector is a very large sector. I'd just like to make this last point. The power sector got into the efficiency movement later. It was not part of the efficiency movement in the early days, but got into the efficiency movement later. And today, many of the utilities have demand-side management projects, demand-side response programs, and so on and so forth. So the power sector, you're right, has a kind of place.
Thank you, Padu. Thank you for bringing out that energy-water nexus. Lastly, Padu, one, of course, which many of us have been thinking about and battling on is about the data on energy and energy efficiency. When there's so much of data available in among the different sources, also information about energy efficiency initiatives in the country. The industry has been taking several initiatives. The government and the state governments also have been taking several initiatives. All this data and information is highly scattered. And I'm just reminded about when we are all growing up, we were all told that whenever a book is printed in India, 4 copies of the book would go to one each library in Kolkata, Bombay, Delhi, and Chennai. Is there a way by which we can create a repository of data and information where all the data relating to energy efficiency in India could be made available to everybody and could be made available easily and in a manner in which they can get the information they want at a very short notice with less difficulty? Your views, Padu?
Well, I have always been advocating, and so have others too, for a centralized energy efficiency data repository. And to some extent, pieces of it are already in place. And that is largely because the energy audit function in India has evolved to a very art form. And let me take a moment here because energy audit at the unit level is the primary source for generating a lot of this data. And we have, as I said, taken energy audit to a very high level of sophistication today. But having said that, and I would like to just make this point before I get back to your data question, that energy audit is a way station, not a destination. An energy audit does not result in any energy savings. It basically identifies where the energy saving opportunities are. I do recall way back in the 80s when we used to talk to the industry and ask them, what have you done on fuel efficiency or energy efficiency? They'll turn around, pass on a report provided by NPC or PCRA or TERI or CI or someone and say, hey, we have done an energy audit. What does that mean? It doesn't mean anything actually because it has not resulted in any project. Now, if you want to have a project and you want to save energy and you want the management to know that energy has been saved through interventions, then you need what is known as a measurement and verification system, an M&V system. An M&V system took a long time to evolve in India. Of course, large industry did set up M&V system, but by and large, the discipline of M&V was was nowhere close to the discipline of energy audit. But anyway, today I think that position is being rectified. But coming back to your question of a centralized energy efficiency data repository, I think it is possible. I think it is required. I think the data is available at the grassroots level. All we need to now is hunker down and develop a process where we can get this data, do the required analysis, and provide the required services which you had mentioned. Because today, there is a need for what I call a gap analysis to be done in various sectors of industry. The gap analysis will tell you how industry is performing vis-a-vis their neighbors, how they're performing vis-a-vis their partners, how they're performing vis-a-vis international entities who are in the same business. And then it will also tell you what are the reasons why there is this gap. And this gap analysis should be a basis for corporate India to take decisions on the energy efficiency investments. But they need this data and they need this information, and some of it can be provided by industry associations who are part of the centralized energy efficiency data repository. So the architecture for centralized energy efficiency data repository has been defined. It's not that it has not been defined. It has been defined, but we seem to be approaching it from various directions. Now we need to have a more holistic approach. And as I said, a tremendous past on data analytics. Data analytics in this country, because of IT revolution and so on and so forth, is fairly sophisticated. So we can move from the handkerchief and mirror days of the late 60s and early 70s, which I was, in a sense, a spectator to a part of, to much more sophisticated analysis of energy.
Thank you, but the holistic approach and data analytics is the way forward for energy efficiency in India. Thank you, Badhu. I think we have overshot our allotted time, but it was a pleasure listening to you. Before we close this session, something which you wanted to say about your entire journey, about the book, we leave it to you to have the last word, Badhu.
Well, your next session is on awards. So let me mention a point here, which is covered in the book. You know, the Energy Conservation Day of India is December 14th. And that's the time when the government of India, through the Bureau of Energy Efficiency, comes out with these national awards, which I think is a very, very good thing. But the book describes as to how this national award idea came up, how the National Energy Conservation Day was chosen. And so I happened to be in that meeting as a very junior official watching the process. And it describes a very interesting incident, which I'm not going to reveal. I'll have people to read the book and then learn what the incident was. But the incident which makes everyone look good, how it was conceived. And I think I think I'd like to end with this note that you know, I think it was Maya Angelou, the poet, who said, it is important that one appreciates where one came from to choose the path we need to take. Maya Angelou is a well-known American poet. And I think if we don't know where we came from, we don't know where we are heading. And the purpose of my book was to tell the people of India that we have a glorious tradition of energy efficiency, which was a homemade brew developed and nurtured in India. And we can take inspiration from that, learn from that, and then move forward. And that was my real motivation, that to demystify energy efficiency, which is the first fuel. It has saved you so much more energy than what you could get from oil, coal, and renewables, that we need to give it pride of place, and we need to do it by understanding the past. If you understand the past, the future begins.
Thank
So,
you, Badhu. Thank you. We will read the book on the energy conservation day, and your thoughts on the book and about the entire journey of energy efficiency in the country has been very interesting. Thank you. Thanks a lot for your time and presence. It's about 6 or 6:30 in the morning where Padhu is right now in the US, and thanks for making the time available to be present with us. And to all the viewers, this book, First Fuel, is available in majority of the bookshops as well as in Amazon. It's an extraordinary read. I think all of us should have get hold of a copy of the book and read it as soon as possible.
It's there behind me. I think you can see it on the screen.
Yeah, I have a copy of the book with me.
You have a copy of the book, the First Fuel. Okay. And the foreword has been written by Jairam Ramesh, and many others have also contributed with the ideas. So I must thank a galaxy of experts, both international as well as those in India, who gave me the time to spend with me and who helped review certain portions of the book, because it was very important that I have the journalistic latitude to spruce up events and spice up events, but I don't have the journalistic latitude to deviate from the facts. So the facts had to be very accurate, and I'm glad by and large, or rather completely, that the facts are all accurate. So that is important. So thank you, Giri. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about energy efficiency in general, but more importantly in the context of this book. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Padhu. Thank you all for joining for this session. With this, we come to the close of this session, and we join through the other link for the Energy Award program. Thank you all. Thank you, Padhu. Thank you.
Thank you.